When you think of the most ruthless dictators in history, what kind of person comes to mind? A megalomaniacal tyrant who delights in torture, or a bloodthirsty conqueror who revels in violence? If so, then you are likely to despise this man. Genghis Khan, the founder and first great Khan of the Mongol Empire, has been portrayed in popular culture as a brutal dictator, a monster who delighted in killing millions. But how true is this portrayal? Genghis Khan was indeed a brutal conqueror who led his nomadic people out of obscurity to dominate much of Asia and Eastern Europe. He was also a visionary leader who understood the importance of planning and logistics. And it's this aspect of Genghis that makes him such an interesting study, not just as a military commander, but also as a human being. In fact, his early life was marked by kindness, compassion, and a deep sense of justice. It was only when he became the leader of the Mongols that he revealed his true colors. So what happened to him? Why did he become the most ruthless tactician in history? Well, to answer that question, we need to go back to the beginning. Temujin was born in 1162 AD to a minor chieftain and his wife Halin. His father died when Temujin was just a baby, leaving his family destitute and vulnerable. The rival tribes took advantage of their powerlessness and raided their camps, killed their cattle, and even tried to kill Temujin himself. But despite all these hardships, Temujin survived. And when he grew up, he vowed revenge against those who had wronged him. At the age of 16, he married a girl named Port, who would bear him his first son. Soon after, Porto was captured by a rival tribe during a raid. Temujin rallied his brothers and went to rescue her, but they were too late. Porto had already been taken across the Anan River, which flowed into Russia. However, Temujin refused to accept defeat and devised a plan to get her back. He made peace with one of their rivals, the Tatars, and asked for their help in crossing the river. Once they were on the other side, he revealed his true intentions and attacked the Tatars from behind. He defeated them and rescued his wife, but not before she had borne a son by one of his enemies. This episode showed Temujin's cunning and ruthlessness, two traits that would define him for the rest of his life. Temujin's next move was to unite the Mongols under his banner. Most of the Mongol tribes were independent and warlike, constantly fighting each other for resources and dominance. But Temujin managed to convince them to put aside their differences and unite against their common enemies: the Chinese, the Koreans, and the Karakatai. Temujin's charisma and ambition impressed many, including the once imprisoned Bort, who would later become his empress and the mother of his two favorite sons. With the help of his wife and brothers, Temujin built a powerful army and started to conquer the surrounding territories. His first major victory was against the Taijuk clan, who had kidnapped his brother and killed his family. Temujin chased them across the desert for 24 days and finally cornered them at the Kentai River. There he slaughtered every single one of them, except for the women and children whom he kept as slaves. This victory established Temujin as a fearsome warrior and strategist, but it also revealed his capacity for extreme cruelty. In 1206, Temujin was proclaimed Genghis Khan, which means Ocean of Bitterness, or Righteous King in Mongolian. He continued to expand his empire westward, subjugating the Karakatai, Uyghurs, and the Western Shah. At the same time, he faced a rebellion from his own brother, but he crushed it and executed his brother's family, including his pregnant wife and children. Genghis Khan had no mercy for his enemies, or even his own kin. If they defied him or threatened his authority, he would destroy them without hesitation. But Genghis Khan was not just a mindless butcher. He was also a brilliant tactician and organizer. He introduced accounting rules to collect taxes and tributes from his subjects. He created a postal system called Yam that delivered messages and goods within 24 hours. He standardized weights and measures, minted coins, and compiled a legal code that applied to everyone in his empire. He even set up a parliament called the Kurultai to consult with his fellow chieftains and make decisions. By introducing order and efficiency, Genghis Khan made his empire stable and prosperous. Under his rule, the Mongols developed new weapons and tactics that made them invincible in battle. They used cavalry charges to break enemy formations and then followed up with archers who shot down anyone who tried to flee. They also employed psychological warfare, spreading rumors that demoralized their enemies and made them surrender without fighting. For example, when Genghis Khan besieged a city called Hukkar, he sent a letter to its governor saying, "Submit, and I will show you mercy. Resist, and I will destroy you." When the governor ignored him, Genghis Khan pretended to retreat. But then he came back with a surprise attack at night and captured the city. He repeated this trick several times, and even against larger and stronger opponents like the Khwarezmians. Genghis Khan's greatest victory was at the Battle of the Kalka River in 1223, where he fought against the Russians. The Russians thought they could easily defeat the Mongols because they had more soldiers and better armor. But they underestimated Genghis Khan's intelligence and adaptability. He used his knowledge of the terrain and weather to lure the Russians into a trap and then attack them when they were exhausted. He also employed guerrilla tactics, sending small groups of fast-moving cavalrymen to harass the Russian supply lines and reinforcements. As a result, the Russians lost thousands of men and had to flee in disorder. This victory opened the door for Genghis Khan to invade Eastern Europe, but he never did it. He died in 1227 after falling off a horse during a hunting trip. Some say he broke his leg and bled to death. Others say he was poisoned by his wife Sorgatani, who wanted to avenge her father who died in the war against the Khwarezmians. Whatever the cause, Genghis Khan's death marked the end of an era. He left behind a vast empire that stretched from the Pacific Ocean to Eastern Europe, but it was only a fragment of his dream. Genghis Khan had planned to conquer the whole world, but he couldn't finish the job because he lacked the skills and knowledge to navigate the seas. He wanted to reach the Pacific coast of Japan, but he didn't know how to sail. He dreamed of invading Europe through the Caucasus Mountains, but he didn't have enough ships to transport his army across the oceans. Genghis Khan was a man of the desert. He knew how to ride horses and shoot arrows, but he couldn't handle the challenges of maritime warfare or long-distance logistics. That's why his empire stopped at the Ural River, which flows between Europe and Asia. He never saw the ocean, let alone the Pacific. But Genghis Khan's impact went beyond his geographical limits. He changed the way people lived, fought, and traded in Eurasia. He connected the East and West through his empire and facilitated the exchange of goods, ideas, and innovations. He also promoted religious tolerance and freedom of movement within his empire. In fact, he welcomed merchants, missionaries, and diplomats from all over the world, regardless of their religion or ethnicity. He protected their safety and respected their customs and beliefs. Genghis Khan was not a fanatic or a bigot. He didn't care what people believed as long as they paid their taxes and obeyed his laws. He even invited the Pope to send him some preachers who could convert him to Christianity. But the Pope refused and called Genghis Khan a heretic and a savage. Maybe if the Pope had accepted Genghis Khan's offer, history would have turned out differently. Maybe Genghis Khan would have become a Christian and spread Christianity throughout Asia. Or maybe he would have ignored Europe altogether and focused on conquering Africa and India. Who knows? But what we do know is that Genghis Khan was a man who could have changed the course of history if he had lived longer and learned how to navigate the seas. So was Genghis Khan the most ruthless tactician in history? Well, he certainly was one of the most successful military leaders of all time. He won almost all of his battles and expanded his empire faster than any other conqueror. He also developed innovative strategies and tactics that his enemies couldn't cope with. And he applied scientific methods to collect intelligence and plan his campaigns. But ruthlessness is a subjective term. Genghis Khan was ruthless towards his enemies, but he was merciful towards his subjects. He was merciless towards his rivals, but he was generous towards his allies. He was vindictive towards those who betrayed him, but he was loyal towards those who served him. Genghis Khan was a complex man who couldn't be labeled as simply ruthless or any other single adjective. He was a conqueror, a visionary, a monster, and a legend. He was Genghis Khan, the ocean of bitterness, the righteous king,